So this video is about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is a movie based off the Stephen King book of the same name. I've never read the Stephen King version, but apparently one way in which they differ is the haunted room number. In Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, it was haunted room number 237. In Stephen King's book, it was room 217. We're not going to focus too much on 217, but that did stand out to me because if we use the release date, the United States release date of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, May 23rd, 1980, and go forwards 217 days, that brings you to December 26th, what happens to be Jared Leto's birthday. Lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars. Their fame catapulted when they did the music video, The Kill, as a tribute to The Shining. So I'll leave a link in the description, a few links. I made a video presentation showing some connections. Everybody seems to know about this, that The Kill music video was a tribute to The Shining. But I pointed out their connections to the Joker. And later I found out I was not the first to say that. Like I said, I will leave links in the description box, one for the music video, one for my decode, and probably a few more. But the basics is that Jared Leto basically is the Jack Torrance character from The Shining, and Jack Torrance is played by Jack Nicholson, who would also play Jack Napier, Joker, and Jared Leto would play the Joker in one of the Suicide Squad movies. And more recently, I saw someone made a comment on Reddit, a post on Reddit about the connections similar to what I pointed out. They talked about it before I did. Apparently I did not see it, but I just saw it recently, and they pointed out that Jack Nicholson played the Joker, and then roughly 27 years later, Jared Leto would play the Joker. And go further back in history, and Jack Nicholson played Jack Torrance in The Shining, and roughly 27 years later, Jared Leto would do the music video The Kill, which was a tribute to The Shining. And then, so speaking of 27, they talked about how Jared Leto was in the movie Chapter 27. So they pointed out these connections, and they said, coincidence? ? And then they said yes. And I was saying no, it's not really a mere coincidence. And I would say there's a connection with Catcher in the Rye. In that movie, Chapter 27, it's based on Mark David Chapman. And, of course, that's the person they say is responsible for the death of John Lennon. And one thing that a lot of people seem to know about is that he was trying to bring the attention of the world to the book The Catcher in the Rye. And something about that book you can see in The Shining. Shelley Duvall's character, the mother, the wife of Jack Torrance, she's reading The Catcher in the Rye at one point in the movie. And I was trying to figure out what's the 27 thing, other than, Jack Nicholson plays Jack Torrance, and then 27 years later, Jared Leto plays a version of Jack Torrance, and Jack Nicholson plays Jack Napier, the Joker, in a Batman film, and then roughly 27 years later, Jared Leto plays Joker. And Jared Leto was also in Chapter 27. Well, apparently it's called Chapter 27 because The Catcher in the Rye did not have 27 chapters. It falls short. So John Lennon's killer there was supposed to be writing the 27th chapter, figuratively. So enough about that. Like I said, there'll be links in the description box. I want to talk about some connections with Stanley Kubrick, Jack Nicholson, and Johnny Carson. So there's an iconic quote, "Here's Johnny," which is ripped off of Johnny Carson, host of one of the late night shows. I don't know about the newer generation, but anybody born before The Shining came out knows that that's where that came from, the Johnny Carson. "Here's Johnny." And it is a very quotable line from The Shining, and it's been said that that line is probably more infamous because of The Shining rather than people remembering it from Johnny Carson. So we're going to show first a few date calculations, date spans. And when I say span, I mean including the ending date. All right, so as I said, including the ending date, from Jack Nicholson's date of birth, which was April 22nd, 1937, going forwards a span of 185 days. And we're going to talk about this number a few times. But going from his date of birth, going forwards a span of 185 days brings you to October 23rd, which is Johnny Carson's birthday. Not his date of birth, but his next birthday following the Jack Nicholson's date of birth. Now we'll look at Johnny Carson's date of death and go forwards to what would be Stanley Kubrick's next birthday. So Johnny Carson died on January 23rd, 2005. That's what we're told. So if we go forwards a span of 185, again, 185, like I said, we're going to talk about this. A span of 185 days later brings you to July 26th, Stanley Kubrick's next birthday. So again, from Jack Nicholson's date of birth until Johnny Carson's next birthday was a span of 185 days. From Johnny Carson's date of death until Kubrick's next birthday was a span of 185 days. Now let's look at the 185th day of the year. In a standard year, 185th day of the year is July 4th, and at the very end of The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, there shows this cryptic photo of Jack Nicholson's character, Jack Torrance, in a photo, a very old photo, dated July 4th. I'm sure the year is significant, but I just wanted to show this 185 connection. Now, I apologize for the awkward visual here. I kind of squeezed these numbers in here, but I have composite numbers. I have the first 185 composite numbers. Notice the 185th composite is 237, just like the haunted room number. Again, in Stanley Kubrick's version, it was haunted room number 237. And if we use this English composites gematria cipher, remember, instead of A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, it's A is the first composite, B is the second composite, C is the third composite, and so on. So using this composites cipher, that iconic line, "Here's Johnny," has a value of 237. And I say iconic because it really is. That's one of the first things I think that people think about with The Shining. And this photo you see in the middle, Jack looking all crazy. That's the moment where he puts an axe through the door, puts his face through the crack in the door, and says, "Here's Johnny." I would say one more bit from that movie that everybody seems to know about is the red rum. Red rum. The little boy, Danny Torrance, he writes on a door, "Red rum," and he has two of his letters are flipped backwards, a D and an R, and it kind of suggests, so let's flip this in a mirror. And his mother's, Shelley Duvall's character there, Jack Torrance's wife, she looks over in the mirror and she reads what looks like the word murder, except the mirror image of it has a couple of other letters flipped, the R and the E. Well, call this a stretch if you will, but I just had to document this for myself anyways, is that if we look at the red rum and the murder with the flipped letters, and we consider that the flipped letters do not have values, red rum and murder, written out like that,